In this video, I want to talk with you a little bit about the heart of God and one of the things that really upsets him about our attitudes. Isaiah 58, shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near to them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Those of you who say to me over and over, I have heard this for years, but I don't hear from God the way you do. No, I pursue God, and I pursue him single-mindedly, and that's why I hear from him. That's why he responds to me. If he's not responding to you, it's because of you. Don't make God the liar. He says that he will not turn away anyone who comes to him. Look for him. Look for the ways that he's speaking to you. How is he rebuking you? A lot of you think that he couldn't possibly be rebuking you. He's rebuking all of us. Because what we're doing right now is being purified, made spotless, and refined. He's letting us know who we've been, and he's changing us into something new. If you are a person who can't be corrected, and I know a lot of you, that may be the problem. That you think you're above it. You think you're exempt from it. You think you're exempt from becoming this new creation that you have already been told you must become in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. You're being purified, made spotless, and refined. You're in a covenant in which your condition is not a good condition. You have physical flesh that wants sinful things, and your covenant is that you have to be circumcised in heart, and yet you have from the sinful flesh, and yet you have this sinful flesh that is constantly trying to get its tentacles back onto you. And if you're not engaging in a regular process of being changed by God and receiving his ministry and being in this covenant and being purified, made spotless, and refined, you're not in the covenant. You're not fulfilling the covenant. Don't expect him to respond to you. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near to them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you've not seen it? Like as though this is a box to be checked. Why have we humbled ourselves and you've not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please. You exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. He's been clear. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. This is not a box to be checked. What you're doing when you're fasting is you're returning to God, and you must return to him in the place where he'll listen to you, because he won't listen to you in your flesh. You must return to him in the heart and the spirit. He's cleaning you up in your heart. Your spirit is willing. Your flesh is weak. You think he's going to respond to you when you go to him in impetuous, desperate flesh? Or do you think that there's some work you need to do in order to get in the right position to actually hear him? God is spirit, and he's given you a spirit that to relate with his spirit. That's where you need to meet him. Someone told me a little while ago, and I don't think that she would mind me sharing this, that she was experiencing an intense time of grief, and she was praying, found herself praying like a little child. And she said to me that one of the things that she was thinking, is this what I was supposed to be doing all along? Was I supposed to be praying this way all along? Yes, the answer is yes. Grief is so important in Scripture. And if you think about what grief does to you, it brings you into the right size. You don't think that you're super powerful when you're out of control of everything, when you are faced with the fact that you can't change your circumstances. You're brought to the right size, and it is a good place to be. It may not feel comfortable, but comfort has nothing to do with what's good. Read the scriptures. You think Jesus was comfortable? Were the apostles comfortable? Well, if you're comfortable in your life, you better question that. Is this the kind of fast I've chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you hear the way that he's talking. He's addressed this elsewhere in Isaiah. People who treat his law, his covenant, as a rule for this and a rule for that, a little here, a little there. And he says, because you're treating me like this, you're going to fall backward. You're going to be ensnared and captured. Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I've chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. Let's stop to think about what that means. He is restoring truth right now at this time in history through his people. And when he says repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings, he's talking about spiritual Jerusalem, spiritual Israel, spiritual temple. What is it that he does through me? He's restoring truth. So if you do this, if you really rend your heart to him, you'll be used in order to repair and restore the truth, his temple, his people, his house, his city. You'll be used for that. And you know what? If you're not used for it, you're not in. Why would you be in? Why would he have some hanger-on who can't be bothered to do the things that he's commanded? And why would he open the door to you and say, oh, yeah, come on in. You haven't done anything to deserve anything. No one should think that they're going to be a priest of God and serve with him, reign with him for 1,000 years or eternity. You should not think that if you are not obeying his covenant, if you're not being moved in an upward trajectory of being purified, made spotless, and refined. If you're not walking in the responsibilities that he's already given you, why would you think that you'd be given more trust? Doesn't the word say that, first of all, you have to prove worthy of being given a trust? Second of all, that those who have been given these trusts, those who have, will be given more, provided that you're doing well with what you have. You cannot abandon the responsibilities that you have in your own family over your own children. And I say this because I've seen it repeatedly. People who are unwilling to correct their children, to be honest with their children, to bear their children, to repent for their own sins, so that their children can have an opportunity to understand what that even looks like, so that their children can have an opportunity to heal from what was done to them by the parent. How are you going to go to God? How are you going to God? Are you saying, well, I don't really like the kids you gave me. It was too hard. The responsibilities that you gave me, that was too hard. You messed up, God. But I'd still like to be a priest in your kingdom. That is not going to happen for you. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord. And I will cause you to ride in triumph on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Withholding from yourself on a Sabbath, on a holy day, on new moon, is not easy, and it's not comfortable, and it's not convenient. But God knows best in what he has commanded us to do. And so you have to approach this from that perspective, that when you go into Sabbath, that you begin to prepare as you are preparing your food and to not do any work on the Sabbath. You should also be preparing your heart and getting into a place within yourself so that you will be able to enter his rest on the Sabbath. If you don't enter his rest on this simple command of the seventh day being a day in which you withhold from yourself, in which you have checks and balances to examine yourself as to how, in what ways have you started to reattach to the sinful flesh during the week, and you're unwilling to discipline yourself, you won't enter his eternal rest. This has been given to you as a sign between you and him that you are in the covenant. The sign is not a checklist of do's and don'ts. The sign is, are you entering his rest on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on new moon? Do you have these checks and balances in place? Do you understand what it is to be restored by his peace, or are you still living in a spirit of fear? Because if you're living in a spirit of fear is living in you. If you are treating his fasts as do this and do that, the Daniel fast, and you have this checklist of things you do, you don't even understand what fasting is. If you're not being changed from a fast, and if you, first of all, are not feeling that you're being restored by his spirit of peace, and fear is leaving you and you're being perfected in love, if that's not happening, you haven't returned to him. You've not entered his rest. You're not being restored by his spirit. And you need to know that a different spirit is occupying you. Moreover, if these things are not happening, if you're not being moved to help the oppressed, to have that compassion, to give what you have to those you see in need, what you have, by the way, because God gave it to you, it doesn't belong to you, and it can quickly be removed. If you're not doing that, if you don't feel that compassion, how can you say that you're doing any of the things that are required in the covenant, that you're returning to him, and that you've rent your heart to what he wants and to what he knows is good? He tells you right here in Isaiah 58, Amos 8, verse 4, "Hear this, you who trample the needy and do away with the poor of the land, saying, when will new moon be over that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath be ended that we may market wheat, skimping on the measure, boosting the price, and cheating with dishonest scales, buying the poor with silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, selling even the sweepings with the wheat." So they're sweeping the floor and selling all of this junk that's on the floor with the wheat. You hear what he's saying? These are not people who are being moved into God's righteousness. They're not being changed. They're not on an upward trajectory. They observe new moon and they observe Sabbath, but they observe it with the attitude that this is a total inconvenience to us, but we're checking a box. When will new moon be over that we may sell grain? It's inconvenient. We want to go make money. We can't wait to go cheat people. When will the Sabbath be ended that we may market wheat? Skimping on the measure. The measure is they would have weighed out. When you go to the store, you buy a pound of flour or a 5-pound bag of flour. It's already been measured out for you. When you hear about these scales, that's what he's talking about. Realize that, they have that image of the scales with regard to justice and the legal system as though there's some sort of, weighed out justice there. What God is talking about when he's talking about these scales, by the way, is that they would have put the wheat on the scales and measured it out. You would have paid per measurement. That's what he's rebuking them for. He's rebuking them for cheating one another and sweeping up the muck on the floor and adding that into the wheat that they're selling. Is this a people who has fasted? Is this a people that has withheld from themselves and returned to God and They're using these checks and balances of new moon and Sabbath and fasting in order to return to him and become what they're supposed to become. No, that's not their attitude. Their attitude is, this is an inconvenience. When is this going to be over so we can go back to what we actually want to do, so that we can reattach to the sinful flesh and live in our physical flesh by the work of our own hands and our own desires. That is not the covenant. And as Paul says, if you do these things, if you believe in any other gospel than the one that has been preached to you in the Bible, you will have believed in vain. I'm saying to you, you will have observed these things in vain. You will have treated them like a checklist of do this and do that, a rule for this, a rule for that, and you will fall. You will be trapped and ensnared and fall backward. Isaiah 28, verse 7. And these also stagger from wine and reel from beer. Priests and prophets stagger from beer and are befuddled with wine. They reel from beer. They stagger when seeing visions. They stumble when rendering decisions. All the tables are covered with vomit, and there is not a spot without filth. By the way, when he's talking about wine, he's talking about doctrine. This is what they've ingested. And this has been established, this drunkenness, this bad wine, this vomit that comes from people who are over drinking and, that sort of thing. That has been established to help you to understand how disgusting it is to God when you are ingesting false doctrine. Because what happens when you ingest false doctrine? That comes from your heart, and it comes out of your right hand, your deeds, your mouth, what you declare, what you think and you believe, your forehead. This is what comes out of you, and it is sickening to God. Who is he trying to teach? To whom is he explaining his message? Think about this. Think about some of the people you've listened to on YouTube with their empty messages and they think they're being so poetic and creative with the narratives that they construct. It's not true. It's disgusting. And it's pathetic. And he says, who's he trying to teach? Who's he trying to explain his message to? To children weaned from their milk? To those just taken from the breast? For it is do this, do that, a rule for this, a rule for that, a little here, a little there. Very well then, with foreign lips and strange tongues, God will speak to this people to whom he said, this is the resting place, let the weary rest, and this is the place of repose, but they would not listen. So then the word of the Lord will to them become, do this, do that, a rule for this, a rule for that, a little here, a little there, so that as they go, they will fall backward, they will be injured and snared and captured. Okay, so I've shown you in Scripture where this is. I've shown you what he's said, what he's rebuking, what his expectation is. Now you need to go discern that. Discern what I'm saying with God. Because if this is the way you treat him, you will not enter his rest. You will not be saved. This will become a trap for you. It will become a stumbling stone that you will fall on. Please discern this message with God.